Right before my son's wedding, my future daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "The greatest gift you could give this wedding is to disappear from our family." Those words cut through me like a blade, and I still remember the way her voice didn't even tremble. She said it calmly, as if she were asking for another bouquet of roses or an extra chair at the reception. That was the moment I realized my place in their lives was not what I had believed it to be. My name is Eleanor. I'm 68 years old, a widow, and for the past 3 years, I've been doing everything in my power to help my only son, Daniel, build the kind of life his father and I always dreamed for him. After my husband passed away, I sold the old house we had lived in for decades. The home was full of memories, the kind you don't box up easily, but I let it go so I could free up my savings, $90,000. That was everything I had set aside from a lifetime of work and careful living. I placed it directly into Daniel's hands to help him and his fiancée Sophie purchase their dream home. When they promised me I would always have a place there, I believed them. I moved into what Sophie insisted on calling the guest room. It was never my room. That title would have suggested permanence, and permanence wasn't something Sophie was willing to grant me. Still, I convinced myself that names didn't matter. What mattered was family sticking together, especially when life had already taken so much from me. The months leading up to the wedding were exhausting, but I never complained. I arranged flowers, signed contracts, and covered deposits. $15,000 went into the reception alone, all from my pocket. Every time someone asked Sophie who was paying for what, she smiled, as though the money simply materialized because the universe favored her. I swallowed the hurt, telling myself that generosity was its own reward. Then the night before the wedding, everything changed. Sophie stood in her pristine white dress, a smirk on her face that barely concealed her irritation at my presence. Daniel, my boy, the one I raised, the one I thought understood sacrifice, stood beside her, nodding silently. His agreement was worse than Sophie's cruelty. She was not my blood, but he was my son, and he didn't even blink as the woman he loved told me I was disposable. I looked around the kitchen where I had cooked countless dinners the house built on my savings, the walls decorated with items I had helped them choose. And yet, in that very space, I had become an outsider, a shadow in their perfect picture. I want you to pause with me for a moment. Imagine you've given everything, your savings, your time, your heart, only to be told you no longer belong. What would you do if your own child, the one you carried, the one you prayed over, looked at you as though you were a burden instead of a blessing? That night, I learned a truth many women never want to face. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people we love most. And when that happens, you have to decide, will you keep bending until you break, or will you finally stand tall? When Sophie's words echoed in my head that night, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I walked out of that house, the one my money had bought, and sat in my car with my phone clutched tight in my hand. There was only one person I could call, Clara Nguyen, my lawyer. She had been with me since my husband passed, guiding me through estate paperwork and warning me about the dangers of giving too much without protection. "Clara," I whispered when she picked up, "I need you to pull the documents from Daniel's house purchase." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Eleanor, do you not remember what we set up? That $90,000 wasn't a gift. It was a secured loan. You're listed as a co-owner. 35% of the property is legally yours." I nearly dropped the phone. For months, I'd been walking around believing I had no leverage, thinking they could throw me away like old furniture. And suddenly, in Clara's calm, steady voice, I realized I wasn't powerless. I was holding a weapon I hadn't even remembered existed. Ladies, I need to pause here. Too many women, especially older women, are convinced to help the kids with no paperwork, no contracts, no signatures. We call it love, but the law often calls it a gift. And gifts can vanish without protection. If you take nothing else from my story, let it be this: keep your paperwork, protect yourself, because one day, like me, you may need it more than you ever imagined. The next morning, I gave Clara the go-ahead. Draft the notice, I said firmly. I want it ready by Monday. If Daniel and Sophie don't want me in their lives, then I'll take my 35% and go. But I wasn't finished. That same evening, I called the country club. My name was on the contract, my credit card had secured the deposit, and my signature was the only one binding the deal. Cancel the reception, I told the manager. Yes, I understand there will be penalties. Send the final bill to me. It felt like reclaiming oxygen after being suffocated for years. They wanted me gone. Fine. But they were going to learn what gone really meant. The fallout was immediate. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree call after call, text after text. Sophie screamed down the line, her voice shrill with panic. 200 guests are expecting dinner tomorrow. How could you do this? Daniel's voice followed colder, but no less desperate. Mom, this is insane. You can't ruin our wedding just because you're upset about living arrangements. I let them rant, and then I said the simplest truth: I didn't cancel your wedding. You can still get married. I canceled the party I was paying for. That silence was priceless. But if you think they stopped there, you'd be wrong. By midnight, 2 uniformed police officers were knocking at my hotel door. Daniel and Sophie had reported concerns of elder abuse and cognitive decline. In other words, they were trying to paint me as senile and exploited, hoping the law would force me back into submission. I sat across from Detective Rodriguez the next morning with every bank statement, every signed document, every proof of ownership Clara had emailed me. Detective, I said calmly, in the past 3 years, I've given them over $100,000. Not because I'm incompetent, but because I was too trusting. Now I've decided to stop. That's not confusion, that's clarity. He read the papers, listened to Sophie's frantic voicemail, and finally leaned back. Mrs. Miller, you're in full control of your faculties. This case is closed. And that was when I smiled for the first time in a long time. Tell me honestly, if you were in my shoes, would you have had the courage to make that call to cancel everything to face the police with your head high? Or would you have kept swallowing the disrespect all in the name of family? We met 2 days later in Clara's office. The room was quiet, lined with shelves of heavy legal books, the kind that seemed to weigh down the very air. Daniel and Sophie walked in late, looking like they hadn't slept. Sophie's eyes were swollen from crying. Her usual polished exterior cracked, wide open. Daniel avoided my gaze. For once, they weren't brimming with arrogance, they were drowning in fear. Clara spread the paperwork across the table. Let's begin, she said, her voice steady and professional. Eleanor is a 35% co-owner of your property. You have 2 options: buy out her share at current market value, or sell the house and split the proceeds. Daniel's jaw dropped. Sell the house. That's our home. No. Daniel, I corrected him softly. It's our home. Mine as much as yours. My money built it, and for 3 years I've been keeping it afloat. Their eyes flickered in confusion, so I laid it bare. Do you know how much I've spent outside of the down payment? Over $40,000. Car repairs, groceries, utility bills, even that Mexico vacation you thought magically worked itself out. It was me covering the gaps you never noticed. The silence was heavy. Sophie's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. Daniel rubbed his forehead, muttering, "We didn't realize?" "No," I said firmly. "You chose not to realize." I leaned forward, meeting both of their eyes. "Here are my terms. I'm willing to accept $80,000 for my share instead of the full $110,000, but it comes with conditions." They both looked up, desperate for a lifeline. First, Sophie, you will find a job within 60 days. You're 39 years old with a degree perfectly capable of contributing. Second, you two will cut the overspending. No more eating out 3 nights a week, no more endless Amazon boxes at the door. You'll create a real budget and live within it. Third, you will report to Clara every month. Bank statements, credit reports, proof of income. If you violate any of these conditions, the full market value becomes due immediately. Sophie shook her head in disbelief. That's like financial prison. No, I corrected again, my voice sharper this time. That's accountability, something you've both avoided for years. Daniel tried a softer tone. "Mom, maybe we can work out a payment plan just between us. We can pay you slowly, month by month." I looked at him, my heart aching because he was my son, but my voice didn't waver. "Daniel, you already owe me $40,000 in emergencies. You never once mentioned paying me back. Why should I believe this time will be different?" He dropped his gaze. Sophie began to cry again. The tears less convincing now, more like the frustration of a child being told no for the first time. Clara cleared her throat. "Eleanor has every legal right to demand the full amount. These conditions are frankly generous." I could see the resentment in Sophie's eyes, but I could also see fear. For the first time, she realized I wasn't the fragile widow she thought she could push around. I was her equal or worse for her superior in this fight. And I want to pause here for those of you listening. How many of you have handed over money time, even years of your life, only to be treated like you don't matter? How many of you have been the family ATM valued only when the bills pile up? We tell ourselves it's love, but love without respect is exploitation. That day in Clara's office, I stopped being their safety net. I became their teacher, and the lesson was simple actions have consequences. 6 months later, life looked very different for all of us. Sophie, who once scoffed at the idea of working, had taken a job as a receptionist at a dental office. To my surprise, she didn't just manage, she thrived. Within half a year, she was promoted to office manager. For the first time in her adult life, she was earning her own money and beginning to understand what it meant to stretch a paycheck instead of spending mine. Daniel, too, started to change. Without me constantly covering the shortfalls, he was forced to manage his own bills. He picked up extra projects at work, learned how to cook simple meals at home, and began paying attention to where his money went. The constant arguments I used to overhear through thin walls had softened. Instead of fighting over debt, they were learning how to live within their means. As for me, I found peace I hadn't felt in years. I moved into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in a senior community. The walls were mine, decorated the way I wanted. I joined the book club, started swimming in the community pool, and even made a few new friends who understood what it meant to start over later in life. And yes, there was even a gentleman named Frank who invited me to dinner after one of our meetings. I said yes with a smile that felt both nervous and hopeful. One evening, my phone rang. It was Sophie. Her voice trembled at first, but not with anger. This time it was humility. "Eleanor," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology, a real one. I treated you like a bank account, not a person. I see that now. I'm sorry." For a long moment, I didn't speak. My heart wanted to rush in to comfort her, but my mind reminded me of the years of disrespect. Finally, I said, "Thank you. That means something. But forgiveness isn't instant. It's a process." She sniffled softly. "Would you meet me for lunch? Nothing fancy, just a chance to talk." This time I agreed, but only in a public place. It wasn't about distrust anymore. It was about boundaries. And here's the truth. This story was never just about revenge. It was about growth, mine, Daniel's, even Sophie's. Sometimes the hardest decisions force everyone to grow up, no matter how old they are. If there is one truth my story has taught me, it's this: family does not give anyone the right to exploit you. Love should never mean endless sacrifice at the expense of your dignity. I gave until there was nothing left of me, and still it wasn't enough. Only when I drew the line did I finally see who respected me and who only valued what I could provide. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is an act of love for yourself, and sometimes even for the very people who resist those boundaries the most. By saying no, I forced Daniel and Sophie to face reality, and in the process, they learned responsibility, discipline, and gratitude. It wasn't cruelty. It was the kind of love that allows people to grow. Age does not make you powerless. Whether you are 55 or 75, you still have legal rights, financial rights, and the right to live in peace. Too often, women of my generation are told to stay quiet, to keep giving, to let others take advantage. But silence only feeds the cycle. Speaking up changes everything. And perhaps the most surprising lesson of all is, This sometimes true love isn't about protecting someone from consequences. Sometimes it's about stepping back and letting them stand or stumble on their own. Only then can they find their strength. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced betrayal or felt invisible within your own family, please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow Real Her Stories like this video and share it so more women know they are not alone. We all deserve respect and we all deserve love.